Welcome, Amber. Thank you so much for being here and for facilitating for us. And I'm so excited. I met you a couple years ago, I think, was it in Portland?
Yeah, at AWP.
And like immediately was like, this is a person I want to have in my life. I want to be friends with, whose work I want to interact with. And so I'm really excited to learn from you and continue to learn from you. Your book, Ordinary Cruelty, is so fantastic. And there's this, Elena Ellis wrote in the blurb on the back, here is a poet who is generous enough to be real with her readers about what it means to be human. Each poem reminds, yes, we're lonely, we're hunted, we're terrifyingly mortal, but somehow still we love and love and love. Yeah, that's, yeah. And, and I know you wear a lot of hats. You're a multimedia artist, you're a poet, you're a mom to a child who is a teenager.
Damn near, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is like 12, which is though this is like for this period of, they become their own art. Like you're not acting upon them so much as like,
yes. Yeah.
You're just like, you're like kind of opening your hands around them and letting them kind of lift from there, which is not unlike what it is to put artwork out in the world, right? The more traditional kind of artwork where you don't have control over it anymore, over how it's received. Can you talk about that, about how those different art forms interact with each other? How motherhood interacts with your artwork?
Yeah. What a great question. I almost never get asked about motherhood. I love that. Motherhood probably is my best art. I did it on purpose. I did it really intentionally, and they are a masterpiece. And according to me, they really just, I don't know why I was so lucky to have this kid. They're super artistic. They're super chill. They're super interesting. And when I start bragging about my kid, I love that people are like, well, that's because of you. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it, sure. I can't really claim credit, but I will gladly. I think it's so interesting because to me, Ordinary Cruelty not only was written what seems like eons ago, but came out eons ago. It came out in 2017. And since then, not only has the entire world changed and our daily experience like this completely shifted, but my writing, my creating has shifted. You said I was a multimedia artist, and I was like, that's so true. And that wasn't true in that book. Well, I mean, like maybe, but not really, not actively. And so it's so interesting how, like art, like the child, you kind of keep birthing yourself out into the world too. And I'm like, Ordinary Cruelty, wow. I'm doing a workshop on poetic form, and I don't know that there's any form. I think it's all free form in Ordinary Cruelty, which lets you know something has drastically shifted in my writing because, I'm talking form as if I could educate somebody on it or provide insight into it. It's unsteady ground. Being an artist, being a mother is really unsteady ground. Yeah, and very similar. We talk about, I work for Hedgebrook, which is a writer's residency for women identified folk, and I'm also an alum from there. So I've gone to this residency, and I have a sisterhood with the people who are there with me, and we talk about the labor of birthing our work into the world. And honestly, like Black and brown children, we don't get to necessarily dictate what happens to them, what the experience of our children, our artwork, our story has out in the world. And we're not always there to witness it either, which is scary. I want to be in control, and I am not in control.
Yeah. And there's when you were talking about like the credit for it, and I think that the thing is, like, we can't take credit for all of the things. Like, we didn't get to choose how cool our kids are. But we get to give them space.
Mm,
And if we do it intentionally and we do it without too much control, we get to see it while they're with us,
yeah.
right? I think people become who they're going to become in a lot of cases, and sometimes it's despite their family of origin or their home of origin.
Mhm.
Um, but by giving them this space, we get this extra, like, I think it's a treat to get to witness the becoming, because
Absolutely.
there's more of it that you get to see. Um, and Hedgebrook is, of course, also about like giving people space
Mhm.
to like get weird and experiment and create, and to take their creating as a calling, right? As which, we don't get. Like, you have a regular job, right? Hedgebrook, it's this beautiful, cool job. I have a regular job, CBAW. I'm so proud of it, but it's not my art,
Right.
right? It's about making space for other people to make art, and to create. And I also think, though, that when I step back from the administrating kind of part of my job and remember, like, oh no, I am applying purpose to this, and I can shift this towards myself. Like, there's something,
Mhm.
um there's some cycle of reciprocity within myself around space making. And um and I fail at it because there's like other things always feel more important than my own needs. And I just wondered how that sort of commitment to space making, both at home for your child and at Hedgebrook for the world of women identifying artists, I mean, like, across uh genres, right?
Mhm.
um how you make space for yourself,
Mm.
your own creating, like, how are you? And I'm asking this out of, because I'm always trying to figure this out for myself. So, selfish podcast.
Yes.
um yeah, how are you doing it? How, or and how are you feeling at it, if that's easier to answer? Also, okay.
Um, Residencies help. So I keep applying myself to residencies.
Okay.
Uh, Accountability buddies, like stacking up some accountability buddies, people who everything from like we write together to like regularly to once in a while we connect and have a session to I'm going to send you a text on Mondays and be like, this is what I plan to do. What about you? Um, I They're more and more essential now because residencies seem like really far off. So right before COVID shut down in March 2020, I was on residency and I had gotten Vermont Studio Center residency 3 years prior, and it had taken that long for me to have vacation time and the wherewithal and childcare, everything lined up for me to go.
Right.
And so I had this month. I was going to do so many things in that month. And 12 days in, they're like, you have 2 days to get out of here. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And so, in the middle of COVID shutdown of many states, people were figuring out how to get home. And it was really traumatic, actually. Stayed with me in a lot of different ways. But making space has shifted. I remember right around a year into Hedgebrook, which was recent. I haven't been there very long. I realized that I was feeling some jealousy as I was seeing all like my job is literally to amplify the accomplishments of all of our alum and all of the writers that are coming through. And I was like, they're all doing such amazing MacArthur and blah, blah, blah. You know, they're all doing these amazing things. Who am I? Am I really even a writer? Maybe I'm not a writer because like I'm not getting poems or books, and just that imposter syndrome really, really set in for a while. And that helped me recommit to making more space um, because there is space. But also, I I did what I had to do to get out. I just spent a week in Hawaii. It's very cold and iced off here, and it was a horrible holiday season. And then Omicron happened, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get to go after all of that. And I banked my risk and I went, and it was scary. And I'm still paying for it in a lot of different ways,
Mhm.
but it was so healing. And it gave me enough of a clear mind to remember why am I
Mm.
creating, what do I want to create. um and so I came back ready to find that balance of, the work-life balance in which I can be a creative worker because my job requires creativity and requires that creative output, but I can also feed that in myself. And so I got my band back together. We're working on an album, and I just did a 2-month visual arts residency that I got last year, and I had like my visual art that I made in an exhibit for like 6 months, and led a workshop on it. And there's like this coalescing that's happening. I have a book coming out, and it's been coming out for a while. Actually, I got connected at that AWP that we met, with
Mhm.
Red Hen Press. But they have, a long production timeline. So I'm like, I've actually not published, but there's another book coming. And that sort of like start stop of the world that we're all experiencing right now. I'm just surrendering. I'm practicing like letting go of should, letting go of what I should be doing or should be where I should be at by now. And just, am I doing what feels urgent? Am I
Mm.
doing what I must with this life? Um, is it important to me, much less the
Yeah.
world? Like before I even, like, I don't need to just be adding more words to the world. I want it to be a value. And that's given me a chance to remove the markers of success that I thought I was trying to hit. Other
Mm.
people's success that would signify to me that I was also on the path. I'm like, oh, my success may look different.
Right. And it sounds like you're creating across all of these different, right,
I'm creating when I need to
media.
create, where I need to create, how I can create.
Yes, which is so many things, I think there's so much like advice we're given about like, being a poet, being a, essayist, much less like that's like within literary work. And then, to be out creating
Mhm.
music and making visual art. Do you find that they interact with each other? The the music and the visual art and the
I mean, mine
poetry
do.
and
Mine do. Yeah, you said something, and I was remembering that I have taken away the pressure for all of them to feel successful. Like,
Mm.
it's hard enough to like need to be a successful poet. So I'm like, okay, if that's my job, then all of these can be like how I want to do them, when I want to do them, where I want to do them. But the reason I have, it's so funny. I first sketched out the show that ended up becoming visual art that got exhibited while I was in residency at Hedgebrook, working on the book that was that became the book that's coming out, that was not the book that got me there, which is Ordinary Cruelty, which is already, like
Mm.
there's this sort of, and
Right.
I learned there that it is best, an object in motion tends to stay in motion, right? So I learned there it's best to like give myself another project, get it started and get invested in it while I'm wrapping up a project. So if I'm in editing stage of a book, I should be like creating something new, because keeping in motion, sorry about the siren, but
No.
keeping in motion helps me. If I wrap up something, then I feel kind of like at odds, and there's a lot of pressure to make it then live in the world and be successful. But if I am wrapping up something, like I've been wrapping up this book forever, it seems like, and meanwhile, I have a new manuscript, and now I'm in the editing stages of that. And so meanwhile, I'm working on an album. And when we're actually recording the album and it's all arranged and ready to be recorded, I'll already be working on whatever. I don't know what, oh, I know what's next. I'm doing flash fiction. Why not? So I'm going to try some flash fiction. So yeah, it's that like kind of like a little double dutch of keep it in motion, keep going. I really ascribe to like the Prince philosophy of just like create and create and create, and not all of it is for the world. And so if you just create what you have to because you have to, you're probably going to be on the right path.
Ah, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a great North Star. It's like that urgency question. Does it matter to me?
Yeah.
Not like, is it the next obvious step in my whatever
You
career
get
path?
lost. You can get lost in there, especially if you are trying to chart it with like your contemporaries. Like you and I are of a generation of poets who saw the transition of slam poetry to page poetry, of slam poets to page poets, and the like primacy that they came into. And I say they because it wasn't me. I don't know if you feel like you were part of that, like surgeons, not resurgence, surgeons of slam poets who suddenly were like the newest, hottest literary thing. But it's thrilling, and it's also like, is that the path I should be chasing after? Should I be chasing after children's lit and young adult fiction? Should I be like? And so, if you flip it and go, what do I need to say? What do I need to write? There's a lot of trash out there. Getting published is not a sign that you're good. It's just a sign that you're persistent. So what do you want to be good at? What do you want to grow at? What pushes you?
Right. And changing the sort of, I think there's so much pressure to be productive,
Yeah.
to produce content. That can yeah, it can freeze you right up too, right? And or you can just be trying to create something that people like, which has its value certainly, but it also can lead you astray for sure, away from your own voice.
If that's your thing, is like being on the, like, that's your thing, that's not my thing. And don't get lost in somebody else's thing. I think is really, there's some people who create in the minute content all the time. I worked for an independent news station for a little while, and oh my gosh, I hated that. I was like, oh, this is not me. I don't want to be constantly clocking what's happening in the world. I want to retreat and come and look at what I want to look at when I want to look at it. Not news. I'm not a news person. And some people are excellent at that. Yes, grow in the direction that like really makes you feel excited to be alive. Because what the hell else do we have to do?
Do you ever start a thing, start going down a road of an art project and abandon it?
Yes. So for NaNoWriMo one year, I started writing, like years ago now, I started writing a magical realism fiction novel. I don't know that, I always say that I'm going to come back to that somehow, or it's going to be a series of connected short stories or blah, blah, blah. And, I feel like there are potential projects still. So if I've imagined it, it's already somehow already alive. And honestly, for a while when I was severely depressed, I would promise myself that I would do all the projects that I had ever laid out before I died. And that's back to the Prince thing. Like I want to get to the point where I feel as a creative vessel, I feel emptied. Like I've emptied myself out, and everything I can think of that I needed to say as Amber Flame has been said. Everything I needed to create and birth. I mean, choreography, like so many things that I've been immersed in art my whole life. I went to an arts high school. My sisters were artists. My mom's a philosopher of language. So we've been playing with words and art our entire lives. And I'm super fortunate that there's nothing that doesn't seem possible. Like, why wouldn't I choreograph a dance? I don't have to dance it. I don't got the knees for that anymore. But once upon a time, I dreamed that I could, right? But I could still make it happen. I could still make it manifest. And my boss was like, is there anything you don't do? And I was like, I don't know yet. I don't know yet. Maybe. I think there are things I don't particularly care for. I don't care for taxes and spreadsheets, but I really, really admire people who do. And I met somebody who did, and I was like, you are fascinating. I want to know you. Like, we need you in the world too, because we can't have all me.
No, no, no,
Sitting here
no.
arting in the world. Like, we need some people to do some stuff too. Yeah, no, I don't abandon things very. I always think there's juice there. There's something
Yeah,
there, and maybe it needs to marinate. Maybe it needs to
right.
percolate a little bit. Um, but I wouldn't say I'm not dead yet. So no, I have abandoned nothing.
And nothing, and sometimes it's not the time, right?
Right,
Sometimes it's not the
right.
time. We were talking before the podcast a little bit about love and how
Lord,
sometimes it's not the time for the love
yeah.
that you think is a fit. You're not the person for that love anymore. Sometimes is the thing.
Right. You
Um,
grow or you don't, or they grow or they don't. And sometimes it's like you were thinking it was something that it wasn't. You were thinking it was
mm,
something that or it was something that you didn't know it was, and it was serving a different purpose. Maybe it was just there to make art. Who knows?
yeah,
But I
yeah,
am convinced, finally, I finally get it, that if they're not right for me, then I'm not right for them either.
yes,
And that's a hard one.
yeah.
Like, it's easy to say, real hard to do, to be like, oh, yeah, no, I couldn't have been right for that either.
No, how much we try to force ourselves into a thing, and that's it sounds like such an essential part of your path to creating is not forcing and going into the thing that calls you next.
Well,
Not
I'm an
like, well,
Aries.
no, I can do this.
I'm an Aries, so I do kind of ram my head against the wall for a little bit. But then that Scorpio moon and Pisces rising come to help me swim around it and be like, you know what? Let's find a different way.
Let's find a different way. Well, I'm so excited to have you with us, and I hope you'll be back for us.
So too.
Maybe when this next book comes out. What
Hey,
genre is this book?
well, this next book is highly form poetry, and it's call and response told in contrapuntal poetry. So it's two characters. It's a full story, fictional characters, non-gendered love story between a lover and their beloved, and they speak to each other in contrapuntal poetry, which is, so you can read down across the columns or down the columns or across the columns to make different poems. And I'm really proud of it. I work really hard on it. So I would love to come back and talk more about it.
Yes, would love that. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Seema.